Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Please Dad No, a channel I created to sort of wax lyrical about the fall of the neoconservative US regime that we're all, forced to exist under. And I wanted to sort of start the channel off with my own little V for Vendetta. So this is sort of a video essay, I guess you could call it, on why working in law was crap. It was rubbish. Now, I actually worked for this grotesque neocon regime, sort of, as a paralegal for a bit at a law firm called Clifford Chance, and that's the experience I'm going to be talking about today. And now, why I say that amounts to, working for the regime is because I was working on snake oil and gas ICC arbitration, right? The United Nations was all over that, and it's their yucky law. I won't be discussing the work I did, just my rat shit experience as an employee, which is honestly pretty damning in itself. But I do want to say the work certainly contributed to my overall disgust for neoconservative capitalism, right? I was pretty good at the legal reasoning part, but it's just completely grotesque of an industry. So as much as I would love to spill the tea on that, the courts would have my ass, so it's just not something I'm going to do. Now, my experience at the firm was one of bullying, wage theft, and just, colonial exploitation. Surprise! And they exploited my disability, which you can't really get more scummy and shameless than that, really. And I guess it's just a side effect of mainlining the profit motive. I can't really come up with another explanation for that kind of cruelty, So I'm fairly sure as well that people will sort of view this video as whistleblowing, which, by all means go for it. But I just find that incredibly funny, I suppose, because it's no secret that the working conditions in Australian law firms are disgusting. It's no secret corporate Australia has a wage theft problem. It's been in the news very recently, in fact. Everyone in the industry knows and participates in the hope that one day they'll hold the whip or something, which in my view is, pathetic, because your emperors have no clothes, right? The carrot on the end of that stick is plastic, she's Fisher Price as it gets, and it's all just so farcical that it made me so unwell on a daily basis. Anyway, when I was recovering from the horrible experience I had at Clifford Chance, I read Capital by Karl Marx, and he actually had a lot to say about the experience I'd just had, and I sort of love this because Clifford Chance originated in the early 1800s in London, right? And that's exactly where Marx was hanging out. I feel like the origins of Clifford Chance, those grotesque legal vultures at ground zero, might have been the very people that Marx was observing. And that, gives me a little joy. Anyway, Marx described a tendency for profits to decline through the implementation of automation. Now, this process is particularly obvious in law firms because when the law was only available basically on paper, lawyers and judges would spend a stupid amount of time looking through those documents for what they needed, the handwriting, the advice, lots of time-consuming stuff. I actually have a really nice example of how law was practiced just before computers entered the fray, and I'll pop it up because I think it's quite fun. Anyway, I digress. There are lots of billable hours in that, right? That rifling through papers, that taxing process of handwriting the advice. Inefficiency is a law firm partner's bread and butter, which is why I think people fail up in this industry, and most corporate industries, to be honest. So I can already sort of hear the bitching. If profits have a tendency to decline, why aren't they? Well, look, Marx had an answer for that as well, and there's plenty of things capital owners can do to maintain this profit-motivated fantasy, right? They can ruin a currency, they can capture the government, and they can abuse the workers, which is, of course, the subject of this video. Now, because I'm a firm believer that blame should be placed where it's due, these two Dr. Moreaus here are Clifford Chance's Australian leadership. And, you know, this one looks a lot to me like he has a bit of a Dick Roman sparkle in his eye. And this one, people call him a used car salesman behind his back. So, like, make what you want of that, you know?
Well, for once, the rich white man is in control.
Now, philosophers have known for a little while that power corrupts. And there have actually been some interesting science sort of proving that notion out in more recent years. And I actually had ChatGPT put together some of those studies for me, which I'll put up on screen. I'm not going to go through them all, but the basic findings were that wealthy people lack empathy, they're miserable, and they have like this really grandiose sense of their own competence that's like bordering on delusional. Fancy that, hey? So we'll pop leadership up again just so you can really soak that in, right? Lack empathy, miserable, grandiose. Because I think it's important to keep in mind going through. And these dudes have like Deloitte does my personal tax return wealth, right? So they fit the bill exactly. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. So I'll start by getting the wage theft out of the way because, like, from a philosophical standpoint, it's just not that interesting. Like, just standard dirty profiteering nonsense, you know, it's boring, essentially. But you know, tell the story a bit. So they contracted me at minimum wage after a diversity internship, stole from those wages, and then gaslit me about it with an audit only like a lazy idiot could have put together. And when I called them on it, among other things, they basically told me to shove it. So, you know, here I am shoving it, I guess. Now, the bullying dynamic is a little bit more interesting and far more multifaceted. So hostility between employees is essential to keeping the capitalist grip going. And I'd like to start by reading an excerpt from an article that I will link below as to why I was specifically targeted by the, you know, very mediocre and insecure juniors employed at the business. And then I'm going to have a little chat about the sort of techniques that capital owners, or the partnership in this instance, use to create these kind of like hostile environments, right? And why. So the article reads, starting in childhood, autistic people are more likely to be bullied both at home and at school. This continues in the workplace. Compared to other employees, autistic individuals are more likely to be targeted by bullies. In the UK, half of the autistic employees report bullying, harassment, or other discrimination or unfair treatment at work. The exceptionally high productivity of many autistic people, along with their strong focus on work, are often touted when presenting the business case for autism employment. After all, no other group of employees has been shown to be up to 140% more productive than their typical counterparts. However, there is a danger to this focus and productivity. Get smarty pants phenomenon, don't like that, also known as bullying and victimisation of top performers, is well documented in the workplace as well as at school. A key explanation is co-worker envy and concern with unfavourable comparison. High performance and the resulting co-worker envy are likely to contribute to bullying of autistic performers. Moreover, autistic focus on work rather than socialising, while contributing to the productivity, can also be perceived by co-workers as negative. Other strikes against an autistic performers include blunt communication perceived as a lack of agreeableness, and simply being different. Bullying of high performers is likely to be covert. Typical tactics include withholding of information and resources, gossip, making false complaints to supervisors, sabotage, and backstabbing. Now I was subject to all of the behaviours I just listed, and when I tried to get help from HR, they were just like straight up ableist and hostile, just right to my face, the whole way through. Like, that woman in HR was just, you know, in my opinion, is a waste of space. She like visibly enjoyed being cruel to me. Gross, right? Now, this lack of behavioural standards does serve a very important purpose to the partners, right? It's a great way to sort of maintain control, because if there are no standards, the goalposts can be moved as they fancy, and it basically virtually guarantees that your employees won't like attempt a coup d'etat because they're too busy trying to like take each other out in this like false competition scarcity nonsense. Now, open plan officers are also like pretty essential to this grift, and they'll try and sell it to you. It's like collaboration, but it's surveillance, and it is to be understood as surveillance. That's the purpose that open plan officers serve. And that obviously puts people on edge and increases the chances like a gazillion fold that they'll treat each other like garbage. But like I said, that's part of the operation, right? Now, plenty of studies also say that it hammers productivity and quality of work because, duh, it's creepy. It's like a perverse control thing. So, you know, if you look at the science, open plan seems kind of counterintuitive if your aim is productivity, but if your, end game is control, it makes perfect sense. So after I sort of worked all of this nonsense out, I decided to leave a review on Glassdoor just to sort of see what they'd do, a little socialist experiment, if you will. And I designed the review to sort of put the fear of God into them, and I think it did. Because how they responded just like perfectly exemplifies just how low IQ capitalism is as like a system. It's just so completely unwilling to fix the disgusting problems that it causes. It's chef's kiss. Like, I just don't have words for it, So I only really need to read the advice to management portion of the review because that's all that's really relevant to how they responded. But it reads, send less diversity copy. It's insulting to your diverse employees. It's giving institutional gaslighting. Also, over a decade of studies show open plan increases employee stress. It doesn't really matter how much tacky marble is about. It makes leadership look like cheap voyeurs. Now, I stand by this review, obviously, and they're also hiring at the time, and I took a screenshot because it was just so damn funny and ridiculous. Now, a portion of the job ad reads, equal opportunities. At Clifford Chance, we understand that our true asset is our people. Inclusion is good for our team and their families, our firm and society. We are committed to treating all employees and applicants fairly and equally, regardless of their gender, gender identity and expression, marital status or civil partnership status, race, colour, national or ethnic origin, social or ethnic background, disability, religious belief, sexual orientation or age. This applies to recruitment and selection. Terms and conditions of employment include pay, promotion, training, transfer, and any other aspect of employment. Our goal is to deliver equality of opportunity, an equality of aspiration, and equality of experience to everyone who works in our firm. Find out more here. I'm sorry, but can you with that? It like reeks of insincerity and it's just like poorly written. I'm sorry, just because you list lots of things that you don't care about, like, what? It's so bizarre. Like, it's really embarrassing and you really need to stop. Oh, and you can't look at the review on Glassdoor either because even though it wasn't removed for TOS, it doesn't appear on their Glassdoor profile. So I'll let you do the math on that one, hey? Okay, so it disappeared. I expected that. But the internal response was more ridiculous than I could have ever imagined or ever thought that I would have actually found out. So firstly, internally, what they did, they doubled down on the manufacturing of the diversity copy in their like silly little committees. And I told them to give up essentially because I knew it was just completely unimaginable that the wage theft would stop or that they would magically just like have some standards of behaviour, right? Like I knew that wasn't an option. I didn't think this was an option either though, but there you go. I should have, foreseen this sort of silliness. Anyway, now the second thing they did internally, which is my personal favourite, they're not putting up walls, no. They sent more cheap voyeurs. Like you literally cannot write this stuff. You can't make it up. You can't. I'm sorry. They have rotating partners from another office flying over to babysit, more surveillance, more cheap voyeurs. Like it blows my mind. You would have been better off doing nothing. I can't imagine how much more uncomfortable and unpleasant that has made the workplace. I can't imagine. And look, just to give these people the benefit of the doubt, which I still think makes them look fairly rubbish, say they do think this would improve the situation, right? It just shows you how unintelligent the employer class is. Like, I can only imagine how bad the talent and client retention is now. Like, I could only imagine. But anyway, that's all I really fancied getting off my chest. There might be a part 2 to this, depending on how unhinged Uncle Cliff responds. But I have exams coming up anyway, so I might just like let this cook until I'm done with that anyway. But the overarching moral of this story is, if your employer wants to play class wars with you, you got to play too. Don't like buy into this divide and conquer bullshit, because it's, you know, to screw you, right? That's all. So thanks for watching. Free Julian Assange. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And bootlickers may feel free to cope in the comments. Hope you have a great day. Peace.
Dad, do you know what Schadenfreude is?
No, I do not know what Schadenfreude is. Please tell me, because I'm dying to know.
It's a German term for shameful joy, taking pleasure in the suffering of others.
Oh, come on, Lisa.
Damn, the weather just got insane outside. Game's over.